Back when I was in college, a friend of mine got me to dabble in this neat little C++ library called nCurses. We ended up putting together a little tutorial for his mentees. I decided to post a remix of that here. Don't tell him. Some quick background. C is an abstract programming language. Well, it's a low-level general-purpose programming language developed back in the Unix days, but it's technically an abstract language. C++ is a variation that adds some features, namely object-oriented programming. Yeah, simplification. Not important. I really like C because it has a lot of convenient high-level features, but it also offers flexibility and control that can really be useful with a little bit of creativity. nCurses is a software library for C++ that dynamically controls the user input and sets the terminal output. It's different from the terminal manipulations you're probably used to, so I'll start with a little bit of background. Computers are essentially very fast data shuffling machines. Based on a certain combination of bits, they will perform operations on certain memory locations. A portion of the memory space is then reserved for handling input and output. When a key is pressed or the mouse is moved, the information is converted into a bit pattern and then stored in that designated memory location for that peripheral. The CPU can, at its leisure, go and look at that value, read it into the CPU cache, and then let whatever software you're using, probably YouTube right now, at that moment deal with the values. Displays work similarly, but in the reverse direction. Here, a bunch of memory is set aside, whose value is set by whatever software is running. Usually for us, that would be an operating system. For each pixel on screen, n bits are set aside to hold its color. Most monitors you use are probably 32 bits, so it's 32 bits for every single pixel on your screen. Then there are regularly occurring processes which hijack the CPU or GPU to read these bits into a cache and then write these values to the display. Now, the terminal we're used to is pretty complex. There are a lot of processes running automatically to clear, refresh, and reprint to the screen when you do something, namely when you call scanf or printf. When you type on the keyboard, scanf will automatically take the register values and read them into whatever formatting you're looking for in a special buffer. It listens for the enter key and then shoves all that data, nicely packaged, into your program's variable. This is really convenient for simple scripts, but it lacks a little bit of that raw horsepower. nCurses strips all this away. Instead of the library handling user input or character printing, you have to do it all yourself. You have to request every key press. You have to put each value in the memory location, which actually makes sanitizing inputs a lot easier. You have to place each character with formatting on the frame buffer, and then you have to manually update the screen whenever you want to post those changes to the user. So about this frame buffer, you need to imagine that there are two screens, the one the user sees and the hidden one, which is the one you're always writing to. The hidden screen is the frame buffer. So we use the mv_printw command. That moves the cursor to some location, row column, on the hidden screen and puts a character there. The refresh command then stamps everything on the frame buffer to the screen. Then there's also a clear command which empties the current view screen. I'm going to start with a basic menu. So first, go include nCurses.h. So I'm going to begin with the initialization commands you're going to need. So the init screen initializes the screen. You can use cbreak to disable terminal line buffering. No echo prevents getChar from echoing characters. And then curses set 0 sets your cursor visibility on the screen. 0 is invisible, which is what I usually use. 1 is normal, and 2 is high visibility. These are what I use in most little widgets. If you get really into it, you can change these, but these are probably fine for most purposes. So you want to put these at the beginning of your program that sets up the terminal window. Now I put everything that comes next in a while loop, so you can actually interact with the program. It doesn't just exit. I also group everything into 3 blocks. The one block is printing to the frame buffer, another is printing the frame buffer to the screen, and then the third is actually getting the user input. If you work with graphics libraries or game engines, maybe someday, I imagine this is going to feel vaguely familiar. And then you end it with end win to close the window. The astute among you probably noticed a couple problems. One, there's no exit condition. It's an infinite loop. You can never escape. Two is trickier. It's with this refresh command. It isn't a problem here because all the updated elements are going to the screen every time. We're not removing anything. But refresh only updates changes, mainly additions. If we try to move items or reduce the list, stuff won't disappear, which can be really confusing when you're trying to debug a 1,000-line program and stuff's not disappearing even though you're clearing it from the frame buffer. Anyway. So you add a clear and then it's all good. So we can add file streams to read menu options in from a file, which is pretty straightforward. But we don't have much use for a static menu. We want to be able to interact with it. So let's add a variable int selected, which holds which option is selected when the user hits a key. You can think of this as representing the state of the menu. We can then use mvchgat to format the characters with highlighting when we're hovering over it. And note, since we control when the screen updates, you can do printing one by one in order, but you can also do things out of order to simplify the logic. So trying out different architectures is a really good way to flex your brain a bit and kind of learn how the computer's looking at the problem versus how we might look at the problem. All we need to add is some functionality to do something when we select a menu option, and then we'll have a working menu. So I'm going to add a conditional for when enter is pressed, pass the selector index into a switch case statement, and boom, we can add the logic for each option here. Great, we've got a menu. Probably don't structure your actual application like this. This is an example, not a template. I mean, you can, but at least make the menu use like a switch default or something. Clean it up a bit. So I don't know how to end this.